The window next to the house. The story begins in a suburban area. That morning, Hiroshi, a student who just moved there with his family, is bringing gifts to the neighbors to get acquainted. However, the first house on the right feels strange to them, because Hiroshi notices that the house only has an entrance door and one window that aligns with his bedroom. When he and his mother ring the doorbell, no one answers. As they get to know the next house in the neighborhood, they learn that the strange house next to theirs belongs to an aunt named Rumake, who is not well known, and no one knows what she does. The house is always locked. People say that on some nights, they see a shadow of a person at the window, which is probably Aunt Numake's shadow, even though no one has ever seen her come out of the house. This becomes a topic of conversation during dinner, where Hiroshi's mother thinks that there must be a good reason why Aunt Numake does not meet people, as even after ringing the bell multiple times, no one ever opens the door. Listening to this, Hiroshi can't help but think that the window across from his room aligns perfectly with Aunt Numake's window, and he quickly rushes upstairs. When he arrived in his room, he tried to open the window and found Aunt Numake's window so close that he felt uncomfortable being in this room. However, with no other choice, he decided to overlook it and tried not to open the window unless necessary. However, late that night, after he had fallen asleep for a while, suddenly he heard the voice of the old aunt calling through the window. "Are you sleeping, young man?" The old aunt continued to greet Hiroshi until he sat up, slowly opened the window to look out, and saw Aunt Numake, who had opened her window to greet him. But what was even more frightening was her appearance, as her body was covered in ugly, grotesque bumps and warts, along with a long, protruding face and eyes resembling those of an animal, making her look even scarier. She invited him to come visit her house, saying that she hadn't locked the door. After hearing that, Hiroshi decided to close the window, because he couldn't bear to see her house and the creepy invitation. The next morning, while Hiroshi was walking to school, he glanced at Aunt Numake's house, and it seemed like she was staring at him through the window. On the second night, the same event occurred as the previous night, when Aunt Numake opened her window to call Hiroshi, who was sleeping. She said that she had been waiting for him during the day and had prepared some snacks to welcome him. She also expressed her desire to see his face clearly. Hiroshi tried to ignore her creepy words, but Aunt Numake's haunting presence didn't stop there. She told him that since he wouldn't come to see her, she would come to see him instead, saying she was going to come right now. This made Hiroshi jump up and open the window to look out, only to find Aunt Numake trying to reach a rusty clothesline towards his window, asking him to hold it tightly if she reached him, as she would cross over to visit him. Seeing this, Hiroshi quickly threw the clothesline away and shouted, "What are you doing, Aunt? Don't." He wanted to wake his parents to see Aunt Numake's behavior. However, when his parents came to check, they found that Aunt Numake's window was closed and the rusty clothesline had disappeared, leading them to doubt Hiroshi's story and insist that he must have been dreaming, no matter how firmly he insisted otherwise. The next morning, before going to school, Hiroshi tried to look for anything unusual from that house, but found nothing. At the same time, he was unaware that Aunt Numake was watching him. In the middle of the night on the third night, he was startled awake by the frightening greeting that wafted in through the window again. The aunt said she was getting close to his window and asked him to come out so she could see his face. Her hand was almost reaching the window, and if she knocked, she asked him to open the window for her. At that moment, a small, creepy hand was trying to reach Hiroshi's window. Even though he chose not to open the window, he backed away from it for his own safety. The next morning, it was evident that Aunt Numake's house, covered in purple vines, had extended closer to Hiroshi's window. Coming from a quiet place, the story begins in the middle of the night. Liko, a young girl who likes to dream at night, starts crying. Her tears flow down her cheeks. She often dreams that her father has died and wakes her up to play. to comfort her and tell her that her father is still alive, that he is not dead. And even though she knew that, Rika's worries did not go away, because the thing she feared the most was for her father to die and leave her. Time passed until she was able to enter the family's old wedding ceremony with her third brother named Makoto. On the first day she moved into the house with the third brother and introduced herself to be the daughter-in-law of the house, which seemed like everyone in the house was cold to her from the first time they saw her. Everyone acted indifferently, as if she didn't exist. But luckily, when she called to pay respects, the youngest sister in the house was still on good terms with her and asked to call her. No, she felt a bit relieved. She thought that the reason why the people in the house were cold to her might be because they had opposed Makoto marrying her from the beginning. While she was living in the house, Makoto would try to comfort her by telling her that they would understand after a long time. While he was showing her around the house, they met their great-grandfather and great-grandmother, who were sitting in another room. They went to introduce Brother Go to them. However, great-grandmother just turned around and didn't say anything. And the next night, Fiko came to visit her father in the hospital. Her father's voice, calling her at that time, sounded like someone who was dying. Her father asked about her well-being and whether she was happy living with Mangsato's family. As soon as that sentence ended, her father died immediately, and the job was just a nightmare for her that made her cry late at night, just like when she was a child. Because if she wakes up because of her crying, he won't comfort her. The next morning, she noticed that everyone in the house was talking happily without her, which made her feel a bit sad. So she walked to the other side of the house and thought that because she was living there, the house looked really big. But while she was walking around the house, she noticed a faint white shadow of someone in one of the rooms, and after a while, it turned to look. She was shocked and cried out because those figures were so faint that she could see through them. She understood that the white shadows were ghosts or spirits. But that evening, when she told Makoto about it, he said that it wasn't a ghost or spirit. It should be her great-grandfather's mother. When she heard that, she was surprised that she was still alive, and asked how old she was now. Some people told her that she was 125 years old. That answer made her even more. He even said more about why people of that age were still alive. He also told her that he hadn't met all of them yet, because there were still uncles and aunts living in the house. Even though they had mostly disappeared, they could still be found. But it won't be long before they disappear completely, because at this point, Makoto explained everything to her, saying that what she saw was just a temporary image, until she began to understand the rituals of the Topura clan. Until she attended her son's funeral, which was also attended by Ritko's father. But after her father left, the real method of the family began, with the leader of the ceremony telling everyone to try to think of the image of their uncle. While he was still alive, even though his body was cremated, we still had to try to think of giving and communicate with him. Or when everyone in the ceremony set their minds and tried to call him back again, suddenly a white aura appeared from everyone in the ceremony, floating out and gathering together in front, until finally the white aura that gathered together turned into the body of the uncle who had just died, which was like a dead person coming back to life. This amazing and unbelievable thing would only be found in the family and specific people. Only then will she know, and when everyone meets the deceased again, they are all delighted and surrounded by a warm atmosphere. For those who have just participated in this kind of ceremony for the first time, she can only stand in awe of the image of the dead and revived unemployed. After the ceremony, she asked Makoto again for more details about the ritual, and he told her that what she saw, whether it was her great-grandfather, great-grandmother, or even the ghost, they did not come back to life and were not ghosts as she thought. But what she saw was something her family created, which we call a temporary image. But it is not really tangible, just a temporary image that you can feel and touch yourself, that those people still exist and are still in the house, but that is just an illusion. At first, they may be able to communicate with the living, but after a long time, no matter how much we talk to them, they will not say anything, but our family still continues to create a temporary image. They help each other continue when someone in the house dies so that they can continue to be our family. But as time goes by, that image will start to fade, and as time goes by, they will slowly fade away After 20 years, they will disappear completely. But in those 20 years, it helped us to live on. It gave us the chance to tell them we love them in peace. And my grandmother's mother is now 125 years old. They have been with us for almost 22 years and will soon disappear. But even so, both. She was ready to accept that fate, but in the past 22 years, it was worth it to say goodbye to them because she had pressed her to understand the whole thing. She then asked him, and when her father died, could he help create a temporary image for her? He knew that it wouldn't be long before she asked this question, because he knew that she would also want to create a temporary image of her father. That evening, Nakoto went to ask everyone in the family to create a temporary image for Riko's father when the time came. But he was scolded that it was too much, because even if he created a temporary image of Riko's father, what would it gain? Everyone agreed that it was impossible. Many provinces, or the people eavesdropping outside, opened the door and came in, apologizing that she had asked for too much, it was late, and she felt sorry that she couldn't make a temporary image of her father. Moreover, her anxiety from her childhood dream that her father had died made her feel even more sorry that she couldn't do anything. After a while, he came back and comforted her, and told her that her father and mother weren't really cruel, that father was really kind. However, Miko felt guilty that she might have asked for too much and thought that she would go and apologize to them again. This will be thanking you for all your concern and taking a picture of the girl's cheek, but it can be seen that the girl's body has now become thinner. That night, she spoke about Tomoka, and Makoto said that she realized that Tomoka was also just a temporary state. He would tell her that Tomoka had died 10 years ago from a serious illness. During this time, her temporary image was starting to fade away, and even so, Momo still tried to persuade her mother to forgive Riko, to which the mother said she understood Riko's intentions. At that moment, Maki, who was resting her head on her mother's lap, said that she would not leave her mother because she loved her very much, and the mother replied that she loved her too. As a mother, knowing that this opportunity was just a temporary image, she still felt happy to be with her child, even if it was just for a short time. As time passed, Grandma To's mother completely faded away, and Grandpa and Great-Grandma also began to fade. Today, there was another funeral for another family, and we all started the ritual of creating temporary images, doing this day after day. Iliko herself tried very hard as a family member, but 8 years had passed since her marriage, and her parents still acted distant towards her, making her feel that she still wasn't good enough. Therefore, she tried even harder to win their hearts. However, that morning, while she was running after Maki, they had forgotten their lunch boxes. But she encountered a heartbreaking sight when she saw him with Riko, his co-worker, waiting for him until the evening. After Makoto finished work, he finally opened up to ask about his relationship with Muri, whether they were secretly dating, to which he replied. He also said that he was going to marry Muri, which made Riko feel angry, and she said she wouldn't accept it. However, Makoto reassured her that he wouldn't divorce her either, and would continue their relationship. Hearing this only made her more furious, and she tried to grab his phone to call Muri and let her know. On Makoto's side, he wouldn't let her, and in a moment of anger, he slapped her. When they reached the end of the road, Makoto apologized to her, saying he was sorry for not telling her before that. 10 years ago, before they got married, there was an accident that caused her to die the day before the ceremony. He then asked his father to create a temporary image of her. When she heard this, at first she thought he must be lying, but he told her that if she thought he was lying, she should go see her family grave where her name was engraved. Upon realizing this, she understood that this was just a temporary image, and in another 10 years, her boyfriend would likely be gone as well. It would be better for her to leave the House of Roses and say goodbye to Tomoka, after fully apologizing. When she thought about it, Makoto would have to meet a woman who liked to drink, and she cried because she had dreamed that her father had died many years ago. If she dreamed that her father died, would she cry? Reflecting on the past, she felt she owed him an apology more than anything. And 10 years ago, when he disappeared, who would she have to embrace? But in the meantime, she wanted to be with the person she loved the most, as much as she could.